Here in New York, Loretta Swit, the star of the popular CBS sitcom, passed away today. What the devil are you doing, Captain? I realize this is a silly question. Loretta Swit, who won 2 Emmys for her portrayal of Major Margaret Houlihan, head nurse, in a mobile army surgical hospital during the Korean War, broke her silence and disclosed the true reasons why the cast of MASH started leaving one of television's most recognizable shows before her final farewell. Loretta Swit is forever known as the beloved Major Houlihan. Contracts and career changes weren't the only things involved. Fans could never have predicted how much more emotional, messy, and profound it would be. Swit exposed everything, including personal heartbreaks, creative struggles, and behind-the-scenes conflicts. We now learn the heartbreaking unknown tales that caused the stars to bid adieu forever thanks to her stirring parting remarks. The program that permanently altered television. Few people anticipated that MASH, which debuted on television in September 1972, would revolutionize the concept of what a television program could be. Inspired by Richard Hooker's novel and Robert Altman's 1970 film, the series embarked on an apparently insurmountable task, fusing humor so extreme it verged on absurdity with the brutal, tragic realities of war. It was surprising how well this odd combo worked. MASH became one of the most beloved television programs in history and occupied a particular place in the hearts of millions of Americans for 11 seasons. During the tumult of the Korean War, the narrative took place in the South Korean city of Uijeongbu. The physicians, nurses, and troops of the 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital were the focus of each episode. By day, their heads heavy with loss and their hands smeared with blood, they fought against the clock to save the injured. At night, they discovered creative methods to stay positive, played practical jokes, and exchanged smart insults. Laughter became their defense against despair in that desolate, war-torn land where one heartbeat separated life and death. Its emotional depth was what set me immensely away from anything else. In a single glance, the show could go from heartbreaking sadness to hilarious laughter. At one point, you might be laughing at Hawkeye's most recent practical joke or Klinger's flamboyant attempt to be sent home on a mental health discharge while wearing a frilly dress. "I've finished, Radar. My bloomers got burnt." The next second, you would be fighting back tears as Radar entered the operating room to reveal Colonel Blake's unexpected passing. One of the most memorable scenes in television history, it left viewers in a state of shock. No other sitcom has ever ventured so boldly to walk that thin line between heartbreak and humor. MASH presented a group of characters that were like old friends throughout the course of 11. Hawkeye Pierce was portrayed by Alan Alda as a talented surgeon, but was also naughty and never lost his heart. Trapper John, played by Wayne Rogers, was a devoted sidekick whose humor belied his extreme tiredness. Major Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan, a strong, fervent leader who was much more nuanced than her moniker implied, was created by Loretta. Mlan Stevenson's affectionate depiction of Colonel Henry Blake won everyone over, while Larry Linville nailed the part of the stiff and petty Frank Byrne. Radar O'Reilly, the kind, quiet cashier with extraordinary intuition, played by Gary Berghoff, became a household name. William Christopher is the kind father Mulahey, and Jaime Fari as Klinger in his outrageous gowns brought even more color to the scene. However, underneath all the funny quips and heartwarming moments, there was another story that the audience hardly ever saw. The actors and crew were under increasing strain as the show's popularity soared. On set, ego conflicts, creative disagreements, and general weariness became commonplace. Despite MASH's historic victory, more than 100 million viewers watched its last episode, setting a record that hasn't been surpassed in decades. Its creators paid a heavy price for the voyage. The cost of making such a groundbreaking tale come to life was quite real despite the laugh. Even as the show's fan base grew, several of the cast members quit. Who are the remaining individuals? For what reason did they depart? Let's investigate. The inner agony when notoriety became a source of conflict. MASH appeared to be a large, loving family of endearing misfits who were constantly up with a joke or a cunning plan. However, the truth behind those scenes was far more chaotic and tense. Many of the actors joined with the expectation that they would be on par with one another in a genuine ensemble cast. Every character makes a distinct contribution, but as the seasons progressed, Alan Alda's portrayal of the clever, sardonic Hawkeye Pierce started to take center stage. Alda's immense brilliance was undeniable. In addition to being an actor, he also wrote, directed, and ultimately shaped the tone and direction of the program. Some of his co-stars, though, started to feel as though their parts were becoming smaller. As Hawkeye emerged as the show's undisputed focal point, they saw their characters fade to the background. The first to hit his breaking point was Wayne Rogers, who portrayed Trapper John McIntyre. He thought Trapper would be Hawkeye's equal partner in all the pranks when he joined. However, by the third season, it was evident that Hawkeye was the only focus of the writing. Trapper was no longer a genuine co-star but rather a sidekick. No matter how successful the show got, Rogers, who was frank and self-reliant, refused to spend his career in someone else's shadow. Thus, he took a risk. He left, giving up the attention and reliable incomes in the process. Interestingly, he and Alda remained friends even after he left, demonstrating that business rivalry need not sour interpersonal ties. The actor who played the lovable Colonel Henry Blake, Mlan Stevenson, had another challenge. He feared that if he stayed too long, he might be cast permanently, but he loved his position as the nice, clumsy commander who kept the unit together. Stevenson made the decision to depart and look for new chances because he was certain he was prepared for larger, more varied roles. His exit was written by the show in a way that will never be forgotten. The terrible death of Colonel Blake in a helicopter crash devastated and shocked viewers. Stevenson didn't comprehend a harsh reality until much later. More people were enamored with the persona than the performer. Although he occasionally apologized, he stuck to his decision. Larry Linville, who played the sarcastic, unfortunate Frank Burns for 5 seasons, also decided to leave. Frank, however, was always the punchline, a shallow, cartoonish villain, for artistic reasons. Feeling stuck and reciting the same old jokes, Linville yearned to show that he was capable of more. In order to avoid becoming stuck as TV's most absurd idiot, he declined to extend his contract when it expired, and moved on. At last, the charming Radar O'Reilly, Gary Berghoff, departed for his own health. Playing a young, naive character, despite approaching 40, took its toll on him by season 8, leaving him exhausted. This device wasn't leaking into the doohickey and was unplugged from the Bible thing, correct? I understand the general idea, but you lost me with all the technical jargon. His family was missed. He was exhausted from the long hours, and the beginning tensions, such as a furious argument with Stevenson, made things more difficult. In the end, he put his family and health before celebrity. The majority of MASH fans were surprised by what they discovered when these departures pulled back the curtain. A maelstrom of ambition, frustration, and a desperate need for creative independence was behind all the laughter. Loretta was unfazed by the vast number of people who quit the MASH cast, despite the fact that she continued to appear on the show. Let's examine Loretta's tremendous metamorphosis in more detail. While many actors joined and departed the MASH group throughout the years, Loretta Swit stayed from the beginning until the end, going from punchline to powerhouse. However, staying wasn't as easy as it seemed. Her character, Major Margaret Holohan, was initially presented as practically a strict, rule-obsessed officer who became embroiled in a ridiculous covert relationship with Frank Burns. She frequently came across as more of a cartoon character than a real person. Loretta Swit quickly came to the conclusion that she didn't want to continue portraying this naive version of Margaret. She yearned for something more profound, a persona that audiences could relate to and admire. In order to encourage the writers and producers to give Margaret more depth and genuineness, she began speaking with them. They initially objected, but after a while they started to understand her argument. After Larry Linville, who portrayed Frank Burns, left the program, things really changed. Margaret was able to develop without the burden of the poisonous relationship. She ended the relationship that had made her look dumb and started developing deep relationships with BJ Hunyut and Hawkeye Pierce, 2 other doctors. She evolved into a powerful, complex woman, rather than the object of ridicule, someone who was compassionate and kind, but nevertheless capable of being strong when necessary. She was witty, moral, and adamant about maintaining her honor amid the hectic setting of a hospital during a war. Swit's perseverance was rewarded. She only missed 11 episodes in the entire season, making appearances in almost all of them. Her stirring performance moved the audience in addition to entertaining them. In addition to winning 2 Emmys, Margaret received a ton of messages from admirers, many of whom identified with her struggle for respect and consideration in a world dominated by men. However, Swit was fighting her own struggles behind the scenes. As Margaret was becoming more powerful on television, she had to continue to speak up to make sure her character had fair and considerate storylines. Because she was one of the few female characters in the main cast, she occasionally felt alone and worn out from this relentless effort. She subsequently acknowledged that it was frequently a difficult task that left her feeling alone, as though she were bearing the character's advancement alone. Swit was once given the opportunity to start over with a big role on Cagnoy and Lacey, but the MASH producers wouldn't let her out of her contract. It was a heartbreaking letdown. She didn't leave though. She stayed because she believed in what she was creating, not just because she had to. She was aware that leaving could reverse all of the effort she had put into changing Margaret and cause the character to revert to being a simple cliché. Loretta Swit's perseverance ultimately paid off. Major Margaret Holohan, a trailblazer who demonstrated that women could be powerful, complex and inspirational all at once, became one of television's most admired and adored female characters, thanks to her dedication. The rise of one actor who also served as the director was a circumstance that most likely resulted in the departure of numerous actors. Let's examine his time as director in more detail. The resentment and the talent. Alan Alda was much more than the actor who portrayed MASH's witty, sardonic surgeon, Hawkeye Pierce. He became the series' beating heart and the impetus for its development as the years passed. Alda wrote and directed several of the show's episodes in addition to being its star. His imaginative vision turned MASH into a serious examination of the unseen consequences of war, rather than a humorous military farce. The series started to delve more into the difficulties faced by medics and soldiers under Alda's direction. Serious subjects that were rarely discussed on television at the time, like the unseen wounds of PTSD, the discriminatory treatment of women in the military, and the psychological toll of witnessing violence all the time, began to be covered in episodes. Although it wasn't always pleasant to watch, these stories gave the show a sense of realism and necessity. Reviewers took note and commended MASH for its depth and honesty. Because the show no longer shied away from displaying the characters' comedy and suffering, viewers also felt a closer connection to the characters. Alda's influence allowed MASH to expand beyond its initial status as a television show. People turned to it for both humor and the reality of the price of war, and it became ingrained in American society. But this change did not make everyone behind the scenes completely thrilled. Some of his co-stars started to feel that their own roles were being overshadowed as Alda's creative role grew. It began to resemble, in Wayne Rogers' words, the adventures of Hawkeye Pierce, rather than a real ensemble in which each performer had a significant role. Actors' disagreements over contracts and the amount of screen time they were receiving caused tensions to rise. Some felt that the spirit of cooperation that characterized MASH's early years was eroding. Loretta Swit, who portrayed Major Margaret Hotlips Holohan, remained steadfast in her appreciation of Alda in spite of these difficulties. She frequently described him as a bright and giving coworker who made everyone around him feel better. Beyond the cameras, they shared a bond. It was founded on genuine friendship and respect for one another, which persisted long after the last episode aired. However, Swit acknowledged that the entire series was altered by Alda's powerful presence. MASH gained intelligence and courage under his tutelage, but it also lost part of its initial light-hearted equilibrium. Alda made a lasting impression on the history of the show, for better or evil. His zeal and perseverance made MASH the cherished, groundbreaking masterpiece that continues to captivate audiences to this day. Before she passed away, Loretta Swit was able to verify the reasons for the cast departure. What caused her to pass away? Let's investigate. The last moments of Loretta Swit. Loretta Swit's portrayal of the vivacious and independent head nurse, Margaret Hotlips Holohan, on the venerable television series MASH will live on in the hearts and minds of innumerable admirers worldwide. Swit's performance made a lasting impression, and the program, which ran for over 10 years, became ingrained in American pop culture. Tragically, adored actress Loretta Swit passed away at the age of 87. Although the cause of death has not yet been officially announced by the authorities,
New information on her last hours is starting to surface as people recall the extraordinary woman behind so many memorable performances. These disclosures are arousing interest and intense emotion by providing devastated fans and close friends with a heartfelt glimpse into her final moments on Earth. Some of these revelations were disclosed to the media by her longtime publicist, Harlan Beebe, clarified that on the evening of Thursday, May 29th, he had a phone conversation with Loretta. She sounded quite regular and upbeat during that time. There was no indication that she was ill or that anything was wrong. When Loretta's maid showed up at her New York City apartment at around 10 in the morning the following day, she found her unconscious. Although emergency services were contacted, it was already too late when assistance finally arrived. 2 hours later at noon she was formally declared deceased. B subsequently told TMZ reporters that she seems to have passed away naturally, but that more medical testing is needed to determine the exact cause of her death. Loretta had an extraordinary career as an actress. She was more than a pretty face. She gained a great deal of recognition in the profession as a talented performer. Her remarkable 10 Emmy nominations throughout the course of her decades-long career are evidence of her skill, commitment, and the memorable character she created. Her performances moved audiences of all ages and served as an inspiration to other actors. Swit maintained a modest profile in her private life. She was single and childless at the time of her passing, but in her younger years she had known love and friendship. The Hollywood Reporter claims that she was previously wed to actor Dennis Houlihan. Their mutual love of the acting art brought the two together when they initially worked together on the set of MASH. They appeared to be inseparable for a while after getting married, but in 1995 their marriage finally ended in divorce. Swit kept concentrating on her work and causes that were important to her, such as animal welfare, even after they split up. An era comes to an end with her past. Friends, co-workers, and admirers are left to consider her extraordinary legacy. In addition to being a gifted actor, Loretta was a kind, devoted individual who made a significant contribution to television history. She will always be remembered as the woman who made Hot Lips Houlihan a reality and as a performer whose work will be appreciated for many years to come. Loretta Swit creates a legacy that speaks to many people since she is remembered for making her admirers happy. Let's take a closer look at what she left behind for the world to remember. A legacy of purpose, suffering, and laughter. Throughout her extraordinary life, Loretta Swit demonstrated that she was much more than the iconic Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan character on MASH. She didn't go into the background when the show was over. Rather, she threw herself into fresh artistic endeavors on theater and television. Additionally, Swit married Dennis Houlihan, an actor who had previously been a guest star on MASH. Although the two subsequently got divorced, personal obstacles, however, never stopped her. Swit championed issues greater than herself by using her prominence. She was a staunch supporter of animal rights long before Hollywood adopted activism as a fashion statement. She spoke out against animal abuse, became a vegan, and worked relentlessly to improve animal welfare. This wasn't a pastime for Swit. She was passionate about the mission. She was not just an actress. Swit found inspiration and solace in needlepoint, a hobby that made her happy and soothed her mind. She even wrote a book that included her drawings and explained how using her hands to create helped her relax during stressful moments. She never lost her spark even as she grew older. She demonstrated that aging could not dim her lively spirit by remaining active and vocal. She gave her fans the truth as a final sincere gift before she died at the age of 87. She candidly discussed the reasons why so many of her co-stars left the show in the end. They were worn out by the long hours, the emotional toll, and the frequently tense, politically charged environment behind the scenes. As the sole female member of the main cast, Swit also openly discussed the particular difficulties she encountered, never giving up to make sure her persona was treated with dignity and respect. She served as a reminder to the world that beyond MASH's humor, there were actual people struggling with feelings of pride, fatigue, dread, and the desire to leave something significant behind. MASH was more than just a sitcom. It made history by demonstrating that war was not only ludicrous, but also incredibly terrible. It was a place where actors found their own courage and resiliency, and where iconic characters came to life. One of the few surviving connections to that remarkable period was Loretta Swit, a woman who made a name for herself in a male-dominated field and provided fans with an admirable heroine. The final farewells, the suspense, and the departures were all parts of a bigger narrative, a tale of bravery, transformation, and the strength of speaking the truth, no matter how awkward it may be. Mass then was more than just television. It was life, unforgettable, profound, and messy. However, what do you believe to be the true cause of the departure of numerous actors from Mass? Please share your ideas in the comments section below. Remember to subscribe and like.